In the spring of 1900, a crew of Greek sponge divers sheltering from a storm dropped anchor off a small island called Antikythera, and one of them came up from a routine dive babbling about a heap of corpses on the seafloor. The corpses were bronze and marble, statues, spilled across the bottom alongside the rotted skeleton of an ancient Roman-era ship. From that wreck, over the following months, divers hauled up one of the greatest treasure recoveries of the ancient world: jewelry, coins, sculptures that now anchor museum halls in Athens. And one corroded lump of bronze, about the size of a large book, that nobody paid much attention to. It went into the National Archaeological Museum with the rest of the haul. And then it cracked open. Inside the lump were gear wheels. Precisely cut bronze gear wheels with neat triangular teeth, dozens of them, packed together like the back of a watch, in a shipwreck from roughly the 1st century before our era. A museum archaeologist spotted a gear and an inscription in the corrosion in 1902 and suggested the unthinkable, that this was some kind of astronomical instrument, and for his trouble the idea was largely shelved. Geared machines like that were not supposed to exist for another 1,000 years and more. The reasonable conclusion was that the gears must have fallen into the wreck later, because the alternative was absurd. The alternative was true. It took most of a century to prove it. It is worth pausing on what that recovery cost, because this was the birth of underwater archaeology, conducted in canvas suits and copper helmets, decades before anyone understood decompression properly. The sponge divers worked the wreck 50 meters down in brutal short shifts. The operation left men crippled by the bends, and one of them dead. Everything we know about this machine was bought with that. And then the prize of the whole haul, the single most important object ever recovered from the ancient seabed, spent half a century being politely ignored because it refused to fit the history everyone already knew. The statues got the museum halls. The future got a shelf. Here is what we now know, and none of it is speculation. The device survives as 82 fragments holding at least 30 gears, and decades of imaging have let researchers count their teeth and reconstruct the machine they belonged to. A hand-cranked bronze calculator of the heavens, packed into a wooden case smaller than a shoebox. Picture actually using it. On the front face, 2 concentric rings, the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 365-day Egyptian calendar that Greek astronomers worked in. You turn a small crank on the side, the gear trains whir invisibly inside, and pointers sweep the dials. This is where the sun will be, this is where the moon will be, on any date you choose, years into the future or the past. A tiny ball, half silvered and half black, rotates as you crank to show the moon's phase on that day. Flip to the back. One spiral dial tracks the 19-year cycle that reconciles the lunar calendar with the solar year. And a second spiral dial does something genuinely chilling for the 2nd century BCE. It predicts eclipses. It carries the 223-month Saros cycle, the great rhythm by which eclipses repeat, with little inscribed glyphs telling the user which months bring an eclipse of the moon or the sun, and even at what hour to expect it. The machine also had a dial for scheduling the Olympic Games, which is a wonderfully Greek touch, the cosmos and the sports calendar in the same box. And the most recent reconstruction, published by the same research group in 2021, argues the front face once carried a full planetarium, pointers for the 5 planets known to antiquity, ringed around the sun and moon. That last part is a proposal, a labeled one. The planet gearing itself did not survive. But the inscriptions mention the planets, so something tracked them. And the detail that converts admiration into awe. The moon in this machine does not move evenly, because the real moon does not move evenly. It speeds up and slows down along its orbit. The mechanism reproduces that wobble with a pin-and-slot arrangement, one gear driving another slightly off-center, an engineering solution so subtle that when researchers finally understood it, some of them simply did not believe the date. This is clockwork sophistication, 14 centuries before Europe's first cathedral clocks, from a world we were taught did clever philosophy and crude machines. The proving took generations, and the names deserve saying. In the 1950s and 70s, a historian of science named Derek de Solla Price devoted himself to the lump everyone else had politely ignored. He and a Greek physicist, Charalampos Karakalos, put the fragments under X-ray and gamma-ray imaging in 1971 and saw, for the first time, the full gear trains hidden inside the corrosion. Price published his reconstruction in 1974 under a title that still smiles off the page: Gears from the Greeks. He called the device a calendar computer, and he understood what it implied. Then, in 2005, an international team shipped an 8-ton industrial CT scanner to Athens because the fragments are far too fragile to travel and scan the largest pieces in microscopic detail. The results, published in Nature in 2006 by Tony Freeth and colleagues, settled the argument for good. The tomography even revealed thousands of Greek characters of instruction text hidden inside the fragments, unread for 2,000 years. The machine came with its own manual. So the facts are secure. The ancient Greeks built a geared astronomical computer. Now to the genuinely open questions, and there are beauties. Who built it? The honest answer is that no one knows. The inscriptions are in Greek. The eclipse cycle it uses descends from centuries of Babylonian astronomical records, patient observations passed west and absorbed into Greek mathematical astronomy. The lunar theory built into its gearing matches ideas associated with Hipparchus, the greatest astronomer of that age. The dialect and the month names on the dials point toward Corinth and its colonies. Rhodes, an island famous in antiquity for astronomy and engineering, has long been a favored suspect. The dating is argued too. The ship went down around the middle of the 1st century BCE, but the machine may have been decades old when it sank, and one analysis of its eclipse tables argues their cycle is calculated from a start point in 205 BCE. Every one of these threads is contested, which is what makes it fun. Somewhere behind this object stands a tradition we can barely see. Cicero, writing in exactly this era, describes mechanical models of the heavens built by Archimedes, looted from Syracuse generations earlier. Maybe the Antikythera mechanism is a descendant of Archimedes' own designs. That is a labeled maybe. Plausible, attested in one author, unproven by any surviving object. Which brings us to the strangest fact of all, the one the fringe theories feed on. Nothing of comparable mechanical complexity survives anywhere on Earth for well over 1,000 years afterward. A simple geared sundial from the Byzantine world, a handful of texts, and then silence until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe. The ancient aliens crowd and the out-of-place artifact catalogs adore this gap. The machine, they say, does not belong, so someone must have given it to us. But look at what the gap actually tells us. The mechanism is not alone in kind, it is alone in survival. Bronze was money. Broken machines, obsolete instruments, the contents of a defeated city's workshops, all of it went back into the melting pot, recycled into coins and statues and weapons. The only reason this one survived is that it drowned beyond the reach of every scrap dealer in the Mediterranean. The sea was not its grave. The sea was its bodyguard. When Price reconstructed the device, he made exactly this point. A technology this assured is not a first attempt. There were others. We melted them. So the real mystery is not how the Greeks built a computer. It is how much else they built that we will never see, and how a tradition that confident could thin out and vanish, leaving one waterlogged survivor to tell us it existed at all. Knowledge does not only accumulate, it can drown and rust and be coined into armies. That is what the Antikythera mechanism actually is, not an anomaly, but a survivor. The single piece of luggage that made it out of a lost world of Greek engineering, still patiently holding its eclipse tables, 2,000 years past its last appointment. And the story is not over. Archaeologists returned to the wreck site in recent years with modern equipment, and the seabed is still giving things up. Statue fragments, ship timbers, in one season even human remains of a member of the crew. The excavation continues. It is entirely possible that more pieces of the mechanism, or of another one, are still in the sediment 50 meters down, waiting for a season with good weather. The divers brought it up by accident, sheltering from one storm. It had been waiting through 20,000 storms, the water keeping it safe from us, the only museum that never melts anything down. What else is still down there, off some unremarkable island, pretending to be a rock?